Hi everyone, Fresh here, and I'm here to do a quick preview on the Primary Arms 5X SLX Microprism coming up pending my review of it potentially next month. Now, I have no idea if it's actually going to come in at that time, but I wanted to do a preview or review of the overall advertised package anyway, to see how this turns out and how it compares to certain competition. It's just going to involve, visually taking a look at this thing, verifying, and talk about certain claims that they make and some of the specs that will come up on this thing. Now, upon looking at this thing initially, it seems to look like a slightly longer version of their 3X. The 3X and 1X are basically flipped versions of each other, and this 3X has the PLA logo in the back and a slightly larger bell in the front, and it's a slightly overall longer package. They claim in this case here that's about 3.3 inches in overall length. I think that's fine. And it just seems to be a slightly bigger and slightly heavier version of their existing Prism using their mounting system. The ones that give you your high night vision mount. It looks like there's a 193, something close to 2 inches. Same ones as reviewed before in our previous Microprism series. And they have a 12 o'clock mount that potentially could be included. That slightly raises the Prism up a little bit by putting it in between the upper part of the mini ACOG mounting surface and the bottom of the Prism. And I'm very curious about this 12 o'clock mount. I already have a bunch of adapters purchased for it, which uses the Glock MOS platform. I'm just super excited to, have my 407 or MPS on top of one of these things to see how it works and potentially to see how durable this thing is. Now looking a little bit at the specs over here. Some of their claims, they claim a battery life of 25,000 to 50,000 hours. It's very interesting, this rating system here. They do claim typically 30 to 35,000 hours, depending on the red or green reticle on their 3X and 1X microprisms. This change in a rating system range is a little bit different here. And I think it's due to the reticle area being slightly smaller. I think they can now claim that this 25,000 hours might be potentially on the highest setting, or like high to medium, maybe on setting 9 or 10 out of 13. And this 50,000 could be, either in the middle or at the lower settings, like, a 4 or a 5, not including night vision. The battery they plan on using is the CR2032. Same as the other two Prisms, nothing super new there. They probably use the same housing and illumination knob at least. And the click values that they're planning to go with is the quarter MOA. Again, I think that's a good move. Since they switched over to that on the 3X, I think this is appropriate for this one. The 1 MOA increments that are on the 1X Microprism, I think if you use it with a magnifier, they're okay, but they're really at the limits of coarseness that I think is acceptable in a system like this. And this quarter MOA, I think, does show a little bit in the, I wouldn't call them turret housings, but the protrusions for the turrets. They seem to go up a little bit taller. Maybe they changed the mechanism slightly on the Prism there. I could be wrong once I actually get it and once I measure it, but this seems to be changing packaging as a result of increasing that precision. And I think this puts this immediately at an advantage over the Vortex 5X, which only has one MOA click. One MOA clicks because, with that kind of PID, I would expect that you would want a little bit more precision. So I think Primary Arms did something right here in maintaining that click pattern there. Eye relief is 2.7. That seems to be in line with what the Vortex 5X and the other microprisms are at right now. I think that's a decent amount of eye relief and is forgiving enough for strange positional shooting. We're going to test that, though, to see if this is simply a, perfect eye relief measurement, or is there a range at which this is usable? And I'm going to start recording these a little bit in further reviews. The field of view here is interesting. It's 21 feet at 100 yards. I think this puts it smack dab in the middle of the Gen 3 SLX prism that Primary Arms had, their 5X, and the Vortex 5X, which is at about 23 feet at 100 yards, and the Gen 3 being at 19. This is okay, I think. It puts it at maybe what lower LPVO 1Xs are at, if you think about the norm FOV. Whereas on the Vortex, you're at about 116 as the norm score, which is at like some high-end LPVOs 1X. So you do lose a little bit, potentially going to this prism, but again, how that FOV manifests in combination with eye relief, I think is going to be something I'm very curious of when I get this prism. Magnification is 5X. Night vision compatibility, I'm very curious how these night vision settings will manifest. The Vortex 5X night vision settings I thought were actually pretty adequate with normal PVS-14 tubes. Granted, you still have to use an illuminator to make that useful, which I think at long range, if someone else is using night vision or your adversary is using tubes, I think it kind of makes this point moot, in my opinion. It would be very difficult to justify using NV unless they were very bright conditions and you had a aperture setting on your tubes. And I will show that once I get this prism and once this review goes through. Total windage elevation and adjustment 50 MOA. I don't think this is a big deal necessarily. You are not adjusting for windage and elevation all that much unless you have some serious manufacturing defects on your upper or on the action of your rifle if you end up using a bolt action. So this is not really a big deal. Exposed turrets, low profile, tool adjustable. This low profile thing I think came up because the turrets grew a little bit, most likely due to the precision or because they changed the erector set inside of the scope body. Who knows what that means exactly there. The weight is 8.5 ounces, which is interesting. That means that this thing has quite a bit of magnification for its weight, and it's only half an ounce heavier than the 3X Microprism, which is pretty cool. I'm really looking forward to how this thing handles with its 5X magnification, its field of view, when it comes to doing back shooting, short range, and with both eyes open, reticle focus shooting. So this thing will be kind of interesting. Since the field of view is a little bit less than the 5X, I do predict a little bit of trouble because of the fact that you have all this magnification. It could be disorienting and non-back shooting exactly. And if you're trying to spot your shots with a smaller field of view at longer distances, that is going to get interesting. Now, speaking of sight picture and reticle, let's talk sight picture. I'm hoping that the color tones on this prism are going to be a little bit less warm than that of the 3X that I reviewed a couple of months ago. It's not that it's absolutely bothersome, but I need more accurate representation of colors around me if I'm going to use the extra 5X for PID. The Vortex, I think, represents these colors well, so I'm very curious what the glass is going to be like on this particular prism when it comes out. That's what I'll be looking for when comparing those two. The mounting system, it's about the same. My comments on it is it seems pretty durable. It's the mini ACOG footprint, but I have seen videos where the multiple spacer system and cantilevers had potentially broke. I think Focus Trip did a video on this, so that'll be quite interesting to see if this thing ends up being the same in that case, or if you're going to have problems with this additional weight. Not that it's all that much. Let's talk about the reticles here really quick. The one I'm going to be reviewing and that in my opinion, I'm most looking forward to is the ACSS Aurora. The good old Aurora that has been developed first in the TA31 has been put in their 1:6 by 24, slightly lower end LPVO, at the 1:6 setting in a second focal plane. Has been in the previous 5X SLX Gen 3, and now is in this 5X Microprism. I think this is Aurora reticle is very simple. You have plenty of holds for wind, both in the BDC. You have a nice chevron that doesn't block your field of view all that much. It's a slightly wider one. It still has compensation for 300 yards for 5.56. And again, just lots of mill holds for wind. And you do have a Christmas tree that is very similar to the ACSS Raptor that's on the 3X Microprism. So there's going to be some familiar and high-end features here in the ranging and elevation compensation in this particular BDC. This will make this feel a little bit more like a mini ACOG. And the reason I say that this is going to be like a mini TA31 is because that magnification difference between 4x and 5x isn't nearly as much as what you'd get from a 2x to 5x or even a 3x to a 4x. So I'm going to be having some of the expectations that this should work a little bit like a TA31 or should work as a nice compact alternative to the TA31 itself. So I'm going to be comparing that quite a bit to some of those existing scopes that I do have, especially those that could be piggyback mounted. Now, another reticle choice that I found was interesting in another version of this, I won't be quite reviewing it, not immediately at least, is the inclusion of the ACSS Aurora mill reticle. This is new in this case. Now, this ACSS Aurora mill reticle is, as you can see, there are no cartridges listed. That's because the mill reticle is in consistent or what I would call even subtensions. It is cartridge agnostic in a sense. The mills are there as the mills are there. This is a feature that is typical for higher power or for MPVOs and HPVOs. Basically, your 2 to 10s, your 3 to 15s, and your 5 to 25s and greater zoom. This is a reticle that you're going to be using with a drop chart that you provide yourself. This is a full Christmas tree, as you would call it. This is something that you'll probably see in some higher-end buroscopes, in your Vortex Razors, your Night Force NXSs, and some LPVOs that will use a strict mill reticle. I think it's an interesting choice to use in a 5x or fixed magnification prism. This kind of reticle probably suggests that you would be using this in a DMR package within a slightly limited distance, I would say. The reason being is that if it's a 5x and you need to use this for PID and for spotting your shots, you're going to compensate in terms of mills. If you're going to use this with a spotter in a military application, especially this is where mill radians becomes very useful, you want to be able to compensate for this in terms of even subtensions versus saying, hey, I need to be on this mark or this BDC tension. So I think I could see this Aurora mill reticle being used closer for, let's say, within 500 yard shooting, where you really need to compensate for wind or special conditions. Could you use this for 1,000 yards? Yes, but to be able to spot your shots by yourself, I think at 5x will be a little bit more difficult, or at least not as ideal as somebody using a scope that has variable power, where you're going to be in the 10 or 16 range and seeing exactly what that impact looks like against your Christmas tree. So this is going to be interesting. This is going to be, I think, stretching the capabilities of some shooters. You're going to notice on top of the leading lines that you would see for wind, you do have mill holds right next to the chevron as well. So this is interesting. You do get some expanded capability, in my opinion, compared to the BDC in some ways, but in a way you are sacrificing your ability to engage targets at different distances at speed. And this is a disadvantage. This is something I'll probably go over in a separate video, but I just wanted to let you know probably what this reticle may typically be used for. What's great is you could put this on different rifles between your 5.56s and your 308s. Very quickly, have a drop chart ready to go, and you don't need a specific reticle for those. You just have the numbers for your drop chart and you just go for it. It's a different style. I would say I think truing in my opinion, a little bit more difficult in this reticle because of these subtensions for different cartridges. Whereas in your BDC, you just go to your 300 yard mark and you just kind of go for it. Works backwards. Whereas in this one, you have to be a little bit more methodical, a lot more deliberate with how you use it for different distances. So this is just kind of my pre-reads or preview on what I think this 5X Microprism is like. I hope you enjoyed and got some decent information out of it. I'm not absolutely including everything into this, and I don't know how accurate this will be once I get my 5X for review. But I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to, hit that bell, press that subscribe button. A whole lot of my viewers aren't really subscribing to these, and would help drive me to make a little bit more content on this channel, and potentially, put a little bit more money towards testing that would be useful more to you guys. So, check out my player Utreon, as well as my Odyssey and my Rumble. I appreciate the views that you guys have been giving me and the amount of engagement in the comments. This has been absolutely incredible, and I hope to make more content like this for you guys. So stay tuned, and I will see you on the range.